So our last question, the uh, disposed questions, goes to Austin. As a youth activist on the front lines of Black Lives Matter protests, what are the most critical changes youth must take to address racial challenges and face the future effectively?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So number one, what youth can do is first realize their strength in numbers. But number two, speak out. And that's the most difficult thing, is just doing something. So whether that's, filling out a petition on change.org, whether it's posting something on social media, calling out racism in person, donating to a Black Lives Matter organization, whatever it is, just getting involved and being a part of the change. And specifically growing up in Bexley schools, not being surrounded by many minorities, very few people of color, what I've seen is that a lot of the people around me are privileged, and they have a lot of money. Bexley is a very affluent community. So when these kids want something, their parents usually get it for them. So that same, like, wanting an item, well, if you want, justice for your Black friends, even though there are very few of them, well, if they're constantly nagging their parents or arguing with them or bringing up the subject at home, then that will encourage, this change to actually take place. Number two is holding officials accountable. So just recently, not too long ago, BARP, the Bexley Anti-Racism Project, we met with our school superintendent. Now, also keep in mind that there's not a single African-American or person of color of a teacher in the Bexley High School, not a single one. The only Black person in the whole building is the director of diversity and inclusion. And she low-key just takes the side of the administration and really just is a part of the no change being elicited. So that's a problem. But what we were doing is we went to her and we were talking about the strategic plan and trying to rewrite it to include succinctly anti-racist language, because there's none of it in there. So by the end of the meeting, she tried to claim that all of the demands that we had come up with, and I wasn't a part of it, I was sitting in, but that it was already within it. But then my question is, well, if the strategic plan already has the language that it needs to, then why are Black people in Bexley City schools still complaining about microaggressions, the lack of support, specifically going into education, but being, uplifted when going into play basketball or football and all of these other things? So obviously things need to change, but we're going there trying to hold her accountable and making sure that she won't just give us that lip service that she did that last meeting, but constantly going back and making sure that change does come as a result. And I'll make sure, as I join you, Roya, and just Roya at Ohio State, that, I'm just right around the corner from Bexley. So you best believe I'm gonna be continuing to advocate for that change. But number three, being complicit. And being complicit means to be actively involved in an illegal activity or wrongdoing. And downtown Columbus, obviously during many of these demonstrations, well, first, last month I participated in my very first one. It was definitely a great opportunity, but I've been giving a speech about being complicit. And in this speech, I talk about when I was on a cruise ship and I was with some Black friends that I met on the ship, and a group of African-American women was in front of us told to go back to the zoo. Now, there was only one white friend that we had met on the cruise with us, and she addressed the woman. She went up and asked her, "How could you say that?" But looking back at it, I saw how none of my Black friends or I said anything. And in that moment, we were complicit. Instead of addressing the woman and calling her out, we decided not to say anything. So because of that experience at the protest in Columbus, I was warning against the dangers of being complicit, about calling racism, whether you hear it, see it, feel it, no matter if it's a family member, a friend, whatever, it's just calling it out. And then also on that second vote, holding people accountable with voting. And even if you can't vote, because many young people, especially in the high school, aren't able to, you're still able to hold people accountable, such as the school superintendent. So just doing these simple things and other things, being a part of the solution rather than, just being a part of the problem and not saying anything, actively combats the racism that we're talking about, dismantling it. And that's been ravaging Bexley schools, but also our country since its founding. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Would any of the other panelists like to um, ask or comment on what Austin mentioned or regarding the question?
I just want to say that I'm just very impressed with you, young man. I really am. And I'm excited to see where the future takes you with that passion and that energy and your self-awareness. You have a really strong presence and a positive energy. And we need strong Black men like you who are ready to step up to the plate and answer the call right now. So I just want to say thank you for stepping up and doing the work at such a young age.
Of course, I'm following in the footsteps of Kevin and Mr. Strickland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, you know, I think this is a moment that is demanding people to step up and not to be on the sidelines. The fact that Austin is out here calling it out and telling it like it is. I mean, and being able to recognize, oh, well, these are situations and instances when I could have done better, right? And when those moments are, because that's how we make the changes happen. Because the facts are that oftentimes people don't want to change, and they especially don't want to admit they're wrong. But I think ways in which you can have these conversations by saying, look, like, you know, none of us are perfect, and we've made mistakes along the way, but we do need to do better. And you know if you are stepping up or not. And I think this is not something for people to take as defensive. They need to recognize that this is an opportunity to step up and to fight on these issues, and that this isn't just a fight only for Black people to have alone, right? Like, we need everybody in this fight. And sadly, we see racial justice as like a thing on the side. We see like diversity and inclusion as a thing on the side, or something that we have to do that inconveniences us. And I think it's up to people like Austin and others and this group to really shake the systems and force them to move. And you know, it's been amazing that, you know, Roya literally just started at Ohio State in an unprecedented time as student body president, and has already helped lead so much change in this space. And I've even seen kind of behind the scenes where, you know, faculty or administrators are like, oh, well, what do we think about the way students are approaching this? Maybe they should do this, maybe should. It's like, we are trying to demand justice for people. I don't care how you view that one way or another. You have to realize that your tactics of, well, let's just kind of work through the system, and, you know, everyone's got a role to play, but you have to recognize, like, how far has that gotten us? How far has it gotten us? So we need people like Roya, we need people like Austin and Kevin to push and shift and move us together in that direction. And I'm just grateful to be a part of the movement in any way I can be.
And then Jordan, also to address your question of what would the future look like ideally, well, specifically in Bexley High School, first, give me at least one Black teacher, at least one teacher that students of color, other minorities, or even white people can just go to and hear from, instead of being surrounded in this sea of vanilla. Now, number two, mandatory African American history course. Okay, I'm not talking about an APUSH just learning about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Ida B. Wells. I'm talking about learning about other civil rights leaders, other just prominent people of color, figures that have contributed so much to American history, that are constantly overlooked and just aren't given the attention that they need to be given. So I want a course that's dedicated primarily to African American studies, not an elective. And then number three, well, man, I could just go on and on. But I mean, those are two main things. We just like Kevin said, we need some Black.
So now you're getting on my soapbox, Austin, because you as a graduate of Bexley High School want a comprehensive education around African and African American history. Listen, that needs to be in every single school system, not just Bexley. Our history has been whitewashed it has been amended and reduced down to Beyonce, Harriet Tubman, and Martin Luther King. And those are just facts. And so the fact that half of this country, probably more than half of this country, did not even know that Juneteenth was an actual holiday that Black people celebrated is an indictment, not on us as Black people, but on the educational system in this country, right? That's an atrocity that we can't own. I know my history. I celebrate my history. I celebrate Juneteenth all the time. But when you have a president who claims that he made Juneteenth popular this year, that's offensive, right? And that's something that, quite honestly, if you had some type of wherewithal, I told you I was about to get on my soapbox here, you would see that that's a problem with our system, our educational system, the public educational system in this country. And our Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, it's a shame of what she's doing and what she has failed to do for public education in the United States of America. That has got to change.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you guys for your questions.